Okay, sex crimes, victimization, and obscenity on the World Wide Web. This is Chapter 8. We are going to be going through and we're going to talk about several different things. A lot of it involves children. Something that we as law enforcement especially have taken a very strong stance against and have been actively pursuing for many, many years. Unfortunately, it's never going to stop. It's probably only going to get worse. And the more people that get smarter on the internet, know our policies and procedures, the more difficult it becomes. So through this, you're going to understand the nature of cybercrime victimization, describe the groups affected by cyber exploitation, bullying, stalking, etc. Describe the perpetrators of cybercrime, stalking, and exploitation via the understand the law and legislation in the areas of cyber stalking, cyber exploitation, and pornography. Describe the Supreme Court cases that have been decided concerning federal efforts to target cyber criminals and okay, understand and describe the issues with online pornography, child pornography, and child exploitation facilitated by the internet, and understand the ways that sex trade, including prostitution and sex tourism, has changed with the explosion of the online content. Understand and describe the difficulties faced by law enforcement in detecting, investigating, prosecuting cases of cyber stalking and cyber exploitation. And understand the ways that sex trade, including prostitution and sex tourism, has changed with the explosion of online content. And lastly, understand and describe the difficulties faced by law enforcement in detecting, investigating, and prosecuting cases of cyber stalking and cyber exploitation. So the primary targets of sexual victimization, stalking are primarily women and children. And as you can imagine, there's a reason that women and children become victims more often than males do. One is because 98% of all male child pornographers are male. There's a very small, but unfortunately a growing population of females that are child pornographers. The majority of our suspects today are all male. And obviously we talk about child pornography, you're gonna have to have a child. So we're looking at children. And when we start talking about victimization, especially when you start about talking or stalking and things like that, you definitely are looking at the females coming in and making a complaint. A lot of times males feel intimidated by law enforcement and feel intimidated to actually make a complaint. Socially, they're not supposed to cry for help, and if they're being stalked by a female in society, a lot of times people think that's a good thing or cool, that someone, they have the attention of a female in their lives. As you well know, that's just kind of a fallacy, and not very intelligent. So as we are looking at our world of sexual victimization and child pornography, we're dealing a lot with women. Males are predominantly our suspects. It's really hard to put a number on the estimates of child victimization. There's a lot of times the crime doesn't get reported, and there's a lot of times when these crimes are misreported. I remember speaking to a lot of PTA groups and high school teacher associations, and one of the problems we had run into was the children themselves were not reporting being contacted by a predator or being a victim. And you might say, well, that's insane. Why wouldn't the child let you know that they're being a victim? Well, because the child doesn't want to lose their internet privileges. The child tells mom and dad, hey, look, I'm online and I'm getting picked on by this cyber predator. They may not be able to get on the internet again. So a lot of times children kind of take it as part of being on the internet. As in fact, my daughter told me that it was a part of being on the internet, dealing with predators and people like that. And I found that very surprising, especially, my daughter knew the rules, and we've been very clear on what child pornography was and, how to stop it. But even then, she said, these guys are, constantly doing this, and it's not like I can really avoid it because it's a part of my everyday um, kind of junk mail and other stuff that I get from all my different Snapchats and, different online communities that she belongs to. So a lot of times children take the fact that there's a predator in the room just as part of life. And kids are getting a little bit smarter. I remember my son was in a video store. It's a bad but a funny story at the same time. And he was playing this game. It wasn't World of Warcraft. It was another game, Castles of Enlightenment or something like that. Some multiplayer online role playing game. And he was looking at the video wall, and I was one row behind him. It was at a GameStop, and I was looking at the used kind of PC things, see if I can get a deal. And this guy walks up to my son and says, "Hey, do you play this game?" And my son's, it's like, "Sure, yeah, I play this game." And he says, "Hey, do you know? Have you ever played with such and such 14?" He's like, "Yeah, me and him talk all the time." Is he your son? He goes, "No, that's me. And so what's your handle? Because I'd really like to get to know you better." Now, if you could have seen the look on my son's face when he realized that the guy he'd been talking to all this time that he thought was another 14-year-old was actually this dude that was standing next to him, was priceless. And you can't pay for an education that my son received that day anywhere. But he learned that the people he was talking to online were not the people that he thought they were. So again, a lot of times kids just have no idea who they're talking to, and they just take a lot of this stuff as granted. They don't report it. A lot of parents don't report it, especially when you're dealing with family crime. You may have a family molestation or a family issue, and nobody wants to go to the cops. They want to handle it internally. And a lot of times, people take street justice, I guess the easiest way of saying it, and they, take care of things on their own. And as you can well imagine, that never leads to anything but, us having to get involved at a later date. But now our evidence and a lot of things have been compromised. Regular use and access to the computer with the internet. Older children tend to be at greater risk than victimization than younger children. There's a couple of reasons for this, and the first one is very important. Internet capability. To be a victim, you got to be online. So kids that aren't online, don't run as high a risk of being victimized or stalked, etc. But then you say, well, why only older children? It's not just older children, but there's a higher percentage because a lot of parents don't let their kids online until they get a little bit older. And actually that statistic is changing as we progress down through our newer society, because a lot more kids are getting online to be a part of school, for example. We have several schools around us that are iPad schools. In other words, they have no books in the school. It's all technology. So kids are finding that they're more and more online at earlier ages. A lot of schools are encouraging kids to get online and use that format. So there's a lot of push to get a kid online. And I was told by a parent one time, their kid had been a victim, and they said, it's crazy. We didn't want to put our kid online, but if we didn't put our kid online, he would have been so far behind the rest of his peer group. May have been worse by not having him online, because he would have been retarded in his social capability, not being online. I thought about that for a little bit, and I thought, his social capability of online, which is something that people are starting to recognize now, that being online is an important thing in our society. You have to be online to be able to communicate, to get things done in the cyber community or in the world today. sending email, being on Facebook, things like that. These are all things you have to be. And our children are being pushed into that, but our children are being pushed into it at an earlier and earlier age, and they're not getting the training on how to be safe. Older children tend to be more bold too. My 16-year-old daughter at the time says, "Oh yeah, I've had a couple guys send me pictures of themselves naked with their thing," and I was, just absolutely upset that she had seen this. And she's like, "What are you talking about, Dad? I see it all the time. It's just part of being on the internet." Where my younger daughter's like, "Oh, I've never seen anything like that. That's crazy. That would scare me if I saw something like that." So my older daughter was more, yeah, who cares? I've seen a million of them before. It's just part of being online is what it is. It comes with some risk, comes with some dangers, but I'm 16 years old. I can take care of myself. So you'll find that older children tend to be kind of more, not so much aggressive, but they certainly are not as afraid of the internet as they should be. And that can definitely lead to a problem. People that are actively involved in the chat room. So back in when I first started this out, America Online, Prodigy, some of the really old chat rooms. That's where we found our predators. They'd be trolling in the the young groups or the kids groups, and they would be looking for that child to abuse, or that child to groom, or that child to identify that they could groom. And that's basically became their hunting grounds. They were looking for a place or a child that they could intimidate, or they could find didn't like home, or all kinds of different reasons that children do what they do. They're mad at their parents because they got grounded for the day, and they go out online and make some silly comments. So it's important to understand that kids that get out online, they're doing email, they're doing the normal transactions of the web, expose themselves. They expose themselves outside of your house, and a lot of people don't understand that. They'll put the babysitter, turn that babysitter on, and they'll go and do their thing while little Johnny or little Betty is on the internet doing nothing bad. But they're out there with all the pedophiles and crooks and criminals and deviants, and some of them, sometimes kids get put out there without any training or any formal training on how to deal with these people. A lot of parents don't know themselves, so it's not so much that the parent doesn't care, it's the parent doesn't know, and so the parent will allow the child to get onto chat rooms and things that are inappropriate for the age of that child, and not understand that they're causing significant harm. A lot of kids that get online turn rebellious. So this is where your jihadis get out here and they start radicalizing our children, and you start finding out that they're in hate websites, and they're on some crazy blog by somebody that is just spouting a bunch of trash and garbage, and the kid gets spun up because they're looking for something to believe in. They may not enjoy their home life. They may be rebellious, which is, unfortunately, the kids that are really rebellious are the ones that can afford to be rebellious, which means, that your middle class, upper middle class kids that, have the ability to not go out and get a job, or, have all the toys and things, and then they rebel saying, "Oh, my life is horrible. My dad didn't get me my Lamborghini, he got me a Ferrari for my 16th birthday. How tragic is that kids at school see me driving that car." So it's amazing, and it really will amaze you, especially in criminal investigations. You'll be talking to a parent or talking to a kid, and you'll ask for the motivation, and to find out the motivation was something such as that. I didn't get this for my birthday, or my parents, don't love me because they didn't give me this or didn't give me that. And you find in our world, a lot of kids become rebellious because of, that slighting. I had one case where a child put all their parents' credit cards online. He was mad at his parents, wanted to get back at him, and figured the easiest way to do that was to go into dad's wallet, take out his credit cards, and he put every one of his credit cards with PIN, or with the, not PIN numbers, but the security codes, credit card numbers, everything up online, and basically said, hey, you guys have fun, take it out on my dad because my dad's a jerk. Well, what horrendous crime could have made this, or what kind of punishment could have made this kid do this? He was grounded for 2 weeks because he got into a fight at school, and his parents, were a stricter set of parents, so they grounded him, and he went into their wallets and stole their stuff. But by putting their credit cards and their financial history, he caused them all kinds of grief. All kinds of issues came from that. And then the parents found out later that it was their own child that put it on, put their stuff on there. Of course, they didn't want to prosecute, but they were, extremely hurt and, upset and everything else that goes along with that. So, it was not a good day for anybody that day. All right, so some of the ways that people are actually contacted on the web: sexual solicitations and approaches. So a kid will be out on one of their favorite chat rooms, and they'll meet somebody, and next thing you know, a solicitation or some type of approach will come to them. Hey, what kind of clothing are you wearing? Do you like, what kind of underwear do you like? And it's coming from a known friend, supposedly, someone that is a child like them. And child or children are naive in a lot of things, and they're very grown up in a lot of things. But there's it's very easy to get a child to trust you and like you on the internet. It's not very difficult at all. Aggressive sexual solicitations. These can be anything from threats to constant badgering of the child. Your other friends are doing this and sending me their pictures. Why are you gonna be such a loser? Peer pressure. All those kinds of things. Come from that aggressive sexual solicitation where somebody is really pushing the child to have a relationship with them, and that can be something that the child can't deal with, and then the child gives in, and the guy gets away with what he wants to get away with. A lot of times somebody will get an email and they'll say, hey, check out this really cool site, and they'll click on the picture, and sure enough, there's the man with his life hanging out, and the child has no desire to see it, didn't want to see it, but now all of a sudden is exposed to something that they shouldn't have been exposed to, or they run across it by mistake. A lot of times there's sites that advertise to be one thing. We had one site that was called Sammy's Treehouse, which sounds like a really cool, friendly kid site, and it was nothing but adult pornography and barely legal adult pornography. And the whole premise behind Sammy's Treehouse was Sammy sat in his treehouse and he stalked or watched the women walking by his treehouse, and that was basically what it was about. And this leads into the bathroom cameras, drones that fly over people's backyards, looking at women when they're sunbathing, flying into the windows, trying to get peeps of people while they're changing, living their normal life. You're on the third floor of your home or second floor of your home. Don't think anybody can see you from the street, and you're just basically undressing, and don't realize that outside there's a drone with a high-end camera that's recording you doing your thing, or you and your husband or significant other, wife, husband, whatever, are having sexual intercourse, and next thing you know, you've got a drone that's outside watching you do your thing. So these are all things that can end up online. The children may not want to see it, but they click on a stream or click on something that's really cool. Their friend tells them to click on the stream, and next thing you know, there's the kid watching some adult couple doing their thing. And then just basically harassment. This comes back to starts getting into the cyberbullying, where the child is harassed by another person on the line. You're not really sure who it is. They may post pictures, may post sites, websites, Facebooks, things such as that, which cause an issue for the person that is the victim. So harassment and especially online, harassment is so easy to do online. I remember we were doing a federal case. Actually, it was a principal in Minnesota, and some kids were mad at him, and they went out and they created a website, and they put all kinds of really horrible things up there about him. They put him in the Nazi party, and it's all kinds of stuff. And then they sent an email out to the entire school system. Well, they found out very quickly that he had not belonged to this group, and it was not him. But it was already too late. The bell had been rung, and the guy basically left because he could not get away from everybody thinking that he was a part of this group, and they just wouldn't let it go. Some people were basically calling the school system for covering it up, and it's all kinds of crazy stuff. But once that bell's been rung, it's really, really hard to unring that bell. You're a front page news article, and then page 23B retraction. So it can be a really big thing. And then just distressing incidents, things that come along that lead from the internet. One of the things that we used to do in the sheriff's department, the first thing we do at a missing kid's house is we get their computer, get their iPad, if they left their phone, we call Sprint, AT&T, Verizon, whoever the carrier was. We would put an immediate tap and trace on their phones basically, and try to get a ping of where their phones were, figure out if we do an exigent circumstance search for where their location was, and all that kind of stuff. It comes from the kids living on the internet. We found most of the kids. I tracked one kid down. It actually turned out to be a parental abduction. Mom abducted her own child, sent her off to the sister's house a couple of towns away. And the way we found him was the kid posted on Facebook. He's like, "Yeah, really don't like being at my sister's house. She's not that much fun." And we were monitoring all of the kids' social media accounts, and this popped up, and we went, drove over to the sister's house, and sure enough, there's the kid. So it was, and that was part of a divorce, and people do weird things when you're getting divorced. So lots of things come from the internet. Lots of physical world attacks happen because of the internet. Especially in today's world. You saw in the last election cycle, you had fake news, you had this, fake blogs, fake tweets, fake emails. You had all of this stuff that led up to some violence happening in some cities because somebody thought that one of the candidates did this or did that, and they went to the streets and started taking it out on other citizens, blaming the candidate for the alleged thing they did, which the candidate may or may not have done. All right, cyberbullying. It says when it occurs when the internet, cell phones, or other devices are used to post images, it's intended to hurt or embarrass another person. Cyberbullying is an extremely, extremely powerful new way of children hurting other children, or adults hurting other children. No, it's not just a thing that children do to each other. It's also adults that get on there and they bully another, or bully a child, etc. So you have basically the child's out on the web. They've got, they're going through their normal day. They pick up maybe a new friend, and then all of a sudden that new friend starts posting negative things, or they're in a group, and at some point the group turns on them. Or there's an individual that was dating somebody and now they're no longer dating, or there's a cheerleader that wants to be a cheerleader, but ends up not, getting a squad position. So mom goes out after the girl that got this squad position. There's so many strange stories out on the internet today about how people have been bullied using the internet. Bullying occurs, as it says right here, during the juvenile, and then stalking is the adult population. But stalking can also be a cyberbullying with the juvenile. We've had a couple of cases there was one in Minnesota, a couple in Illinois, just recently where a child hung. That was the one down in Florida. The child hung herself, because she did not want to live anymore because basically her Facebook had been turned against her, and everybody was calling her names on Facebook. And she let the social media overwhelm her, and she took her own life, which is just, I don't quite understand it because I'm not of that age and I'm not of that age group. People could blow up my Facebook all day long. When I check it, once every 3 weeks, it would matter, but it's not something that I'm going to go kill myself over. But there are children out there that will kill themselves over the fact that they just, don't have the ability not to prevent their emotions from getting involved. And that's really what it comes down to, is these kids are so vulnerable, so tied to that electronic leash that, not belonging to it is more tragic than just taking your own life. And again, like it says here, the internet's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week thing. The internet doesn't turn off at 5 o'clock and come on, unless you're in Afghanistan and the Taliban are turning your internet on and off. But in the normal world, your internet's on 24 hours, 7 days a week, and there are literally people that will live and breathe by what they see, hear, and post on the internet. They had that young boy in Japan, starved to death, dehydrated to death. He was on his playing game for 96 hours without consuming any type of water or nutrition, and basically he died because he was so addicted to playing this video game. So when you have somebody that is that into the computers, when you have children that get so attached to the computers, you have children that are so attached to their phones and everything else, when that world turns against them, it can be absolutely catastrophic. There's new social psychology terms that have been created over the last few years. Nomophobia, the fear of no mobile phones. There's 2 Facebook-specific psychosis determinations, where one has too many friends on the internet, on Facebook, and the person becomes so depressed because they cannot communicate enough and talk to all their friends that they go into a depression. It's just crazy kind of stuff that you may think, and a lot of you in this class are younger, and you probably are going, well, yeah, that makes sense to me. But for someone at my age, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But cyberbullying is a huge problem. Cyberbullying is something that it's relatively new. It hasn't been around that long, and it's something that is absolutely growing. And more people find ways of making people feel bad. The more and more people will use that cyberbullying. Stalkers are typically male, white, between the ages of 18 and 35. This is just a national demographic, and they are typically smarter people that make more money. Stalkers are also people that are challenged by society, people that have a very low self-esteem. People that are or have a superiority complex. They feel they're superior to other people and things such as that. People that are lower income housing, they tend to be the ones stalked. Again, you've got someone that is a more educated. They enjoy the game. They like playing the game. you have someone that may not be as educated, may not be able to defend themselves in in a cerebral activity, and that can be unfortunate, and that also can cause problems. One of the other issues that you have in the stalking, especially when you're talking about females, things like that, there are females that may not be making very much money, and they're out on the web looking for some type of relationship with somebody that's got a little bit more money, a more affluent livelihood, and they tend to run into people that are stalkers, these males that are out there looking for that girl to have this relationship with. And then when the girl realizes they're probably not quite all there, well, then they have an issue, because that person now turns into their new cyber stalker. Women are more likely to be stalked than males. Again, go back to the social order we're in. It's kind of like men that say they've been raped. A lot of people kind of laugh it off and say, yeah, okay, sure, you were raped, because it's just males shouldn't be raped. That's not something that happens to males. Well, it does, and there's been many reports that I've not personally been involved in one, but I have a friend who runs a violence unit, and he's seeing an increase in male rape. So it's something that is there, but again, women are more likely to be stalked than males, because males are not supposed to complain about things like that. So a lot of times the societal norm prevents people from reporting the crime. And individuals between 18 and 24 are more likely to be stalked. And if you think about the demographic, that's because these are the people out there that are, really on the social media. They're trying to, build their social community through the social media. They are probably posting more pictures since they're over the adult age. They're probably posting more club type pictures, sexy pictures, things such as that they may not have been able to post when they were younger. And then stalkers, typically if there's a strong family connection, stalkers have a harder time getting or stalking someone, because the family will step in, or there'll be a support system for the stalked person, and that will prevent them from continuing the stalking. They call law enforcement or some other agency. So your simple obsessional stalker. I'm in love with you. You're just, you're the object of my desire. You're everything I've ever wanted, and I'm gonna follow you. I am going to be everywhere you're at. It's just basically a simple obsession. I'm obsessed with you. The love obsession. This is I'm in love with you. We're going out for a long time, and then all of a sudden you break up. You don't want to be around me anymore, and I'm just not going to have that. I'm obsessed with you. In fact, you breaking up with me makes me more obsessed with you. And that's one of the problems with the love obsession. It's a very strong emotion that the person or the person has to get over, and a lot of times they can't. Rhodomaniacal. So in this instance, now what I think is I believe that the other person actually does love me. So I don't know why they're being so weird. I know they love me. I know this actor or this politician or this person. I know that they want to be with me. And typically you're dealing with people that are looking for famous actors, people that are in their lives through TV, things such as that. They will be the ones that become stalked from this group of people. There's a belief that they were in love with each other, and now the other person is still in love with me, but is kind of denying their love, etc. And then you got your plain old vengeance terror stalkers. The guys that just can't get over something that's happened to them, and it may be a breakup, it may be a family dispute, it may be something else that has caused this person to, now want to take it out on you, get back at you, get that revenge, put your life into kind of a terror state excuse me. There's religious organizations that actually practice vengeance and terror. People that complain about a certain type of religion, the next thing you know, the parishioners are following them around, standing on their sidewalks, staring at their house, and doing things such as that. So the group, you can't have a group stalk situation where a group decides to go after a person, and it becomes very difficult when you have a large group of people working against you, because it's hard to get rid of them, basically, because you may have 20 or 30 different people, depending on the size of the organization, that stalk you at any one point or any one time. So stalking can be a huge issue and can be a significant issue for people. So as we continue through, and you're looking at the other things that you're doing online, the internet has made especially child pornography, hardcore illegal varieties, makes it much more difficult. So when you're talking about child pornography, the laws that are out there, most of them are federal laws. We have a number of statutes on the books. There's a lot of training that goes on, especially federally covered training. You've got ICAC, Crimes Against Children. You have a lot of organizations and agencies. We talked about it in the first couple of weeks of this course. And you have a lot of laws on sexual exploitation. In 1988, and then it was revised in 1998, established new criminal offenses for the use of interstate facilities to transmit information about minors and the transfer of obscene materials to minors. And what you got to remember is that a lot of these crimes were on the books for a long time. It's just they were not well documented. In other words, when you have these criminal acts or these crimes that were being committed, the definition of the crime was so loose that just about anybody could change the wording or try to manipulate it to be something that it wasn't. Again, I think we talked about before, plays, movies, even commercials ran into these problems. So a couple of things that the 1998 Act did is it really defined what sexual activity was. It also defined some of the other key changes that came later when they re-looked at child pornography and how child pornography was being viewed by the courts and by the criminal justice system. It also imposed a death penalty for death of a child from the result of this offense, and this became a very controversial piece because it was basically, how do you prove that this child directly was affected by this abuse, etc., unless it was a grossly committed crime. What I mean by that is they can see the actual, or they can prove right there that the individual was involved in it. But if someone's in the production, other bad actors that are involved in it, this became very controversial because they try to apply that across the board, not just to the principle of the crime itself. And as you're going to find, one of the things especially about child pornography and these crimes, is there are so many different kind of ways and attitudes, and everybody sees child pornography a little bit differently. You would think that across the board everybody would be, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever, exploitation and all that is the worst thing ever. But there are actually some people that don't see the real crime in it. They see children as sexual beings. You look at NAMBLA and I mean just a host of organizations out there that support child pornography. So it's not as universally understood. And again, these are the people that are going to be a part of your jury and your part of your prosecution team that's going to try to help you put someone away. They may not have the same attitudes. I have a friend who is from Missouri, and he believed that any child that was shirtless, that was child pornography. He came from a very strict set of values, and that's just the way he saw things. And he was always upset that the prosecutor would say, there's just not enough here. Well, we don't have enough. This is probably nudism. We can't prove it's child pornography. And he would get very, very upset that people didn't see the world the same way he did, and it became an issue for him. There's really no current accurate statistical source that reports the extent of child pornography, and that's because a lot of it is just not reported. And then some of it is misreported. People will be arrested for one thing, but they'll take a plea on another thing to avoid child pornography, or not child pornography, but child exploitation. They don't want to go to prison as somebody that was involved in child exploitation. So a lot of times you'll find that people will spend a lot of money on defense attorneys that simply get them out of that. They don't get them out of jail, but they get them out of that and get them into something lesser and included, or something that is not seen as child exploitation, because they just do not want to go to prison for that reason. And then we run into the problem of parents that don't report the siblings, or they don't report their close relatives that are involved in it, because it's a family thing, and the family's going to take care of it. And it's just one of these things that you just don't have an accurate feel. It's a huge problem, but it's just not as reported as it should be. It says right here that child pornography is used by the pedophile to feed and create sexual fantasies, lower inhibitions of a child who they are planning to molest, and blackmail a child into remaining silent. So basically what happens is you have something called the grooming process. And an individual meets someone on the internet, and they'll start this thing called the grooming process. And they basically form this relationship. They find the chinks in the armor of the parent, and they chip away at those chinks, and they make, it kind of expose the parent as being the bad guy. They're a good person. They totally understand why the child is, feeling kind of bad about themselves because their parents treat them horribly. They feed into every aspect of what the child wants to hear during this grooming process. And they also groom them to understand that, they're not a bad person, that they're going to send them some gifts, and they're going to send them a phone so they can talk to them without the parents knowing about it, being involved in their business. Kids are supposed to have privacy according to these people. And they also send, they also kind of run through the sexual fantasies with the children, seeing what their limits are, and how far they want to go, and what their inhibitions are, and things such as that. And this is all part of that grooming process. And then once they do get a child to do some bad things, well, then that becomes blackmail. So the child sends a picture of his private parts or her private parts. Well, then that becomes, you did send me that picture, and I'd sure hate to send that back to your mom and dad. So since you've already sent me something, why don't you send me some more stuff? And they start that whole kind of psychological thing. It's that trap that people fall into once they get into that blackmail situation. There's just no way of really getting out of it. So pedophiles use the internet for lots of things. The book says, they're basically the 4 primary reasons: trafficking, child pornography, locating children to molest, engaging in inappropriate sexual communication, and communicating with other pedophiles. And first and the last one are pretty much the same. So once the internet became something that could be used to transfer files, basically child pornography exploded onto the web. And the web is definitely used for communication and transfer of files, but they also use it to again locate children. So they'll have a child take a picture of themselves. They'll post it. They'll take the metadata off the picture. They'll have the longitude and latitude of where that child is, the bedroom, basically of where they're sending the picture from, or wherever it is that they're sending a picture from. And then all the pedophile does is run the longitude and latitude, get on Google Streets, do the street view. They know exactly what the house looks like. Know what the neighborhood looks like. So it's a very easy way of locating children or tracking children. And also a good way to find children. So if I get out onto the teen websites, or if I get onto the gaming websites and hang around the gaming websites, I'm going to be able to find children that are susceptible, or somebody that I can start my grooming process with, and then engage in the inappropriate sexual communication with the children. Of course, I'm going to start chatting and do all the things that come along with the inappropriate conduct that I'm about to do. A lot of posting of child pornography on the web pages. That used to be the big way of doing things. Now there are so many more clever ways of transferring data that you don't have to post it up onto the web page. The web pages were a very easy find. It was low-hanging fruit. You go out, you find some server that had a bunch of files on it. You find your person or your perp. Now it's a lot more difficult, especially with the use of steganography, offline or online storage locations, secure storage locations, mass collaboration sites like Microsoft Office and Google, all the different, or Google business apps. It has all the collaborative environment you can set up for free. There's just so many ways of creating a place to store and transfer files that it really makes it hard for law enforcement. People sending stuff by email, and not even sending the email. So I create a Yahoo, or I create a Gmail account, and then I put the picture up with my email, but I never send it. Other people log in and they check the draft messages, and they find the messages that we're transferring back and forth. So that's a way to avoid sending the information over the web and getting caught. Is we just never send it across the web. We just use the draft messages to communicate back and forth. That's been a very popular way of people communicating, especially people that are trying to avoid law enforcement detection. Child pornography is one of those crimes. It's just everybody gets upset, and therefore politically, it's one that law enforcement is actively involved in, because it leads to money. To be honest, I hate to say it that way, but child pornography investigations. There's plenty of task force out there, and there's lots of money in the child pornography investigation field. So sheriffs and police chiefs and people like that stand up these units, they're able to get federal grants. They can get money for their department to do other things. So you find a lot of organizations, you'll be like, so why is this small agency, why do they have a child pornography task force? Why aren't they a part of something else? And it's because they're looking for money and other things. It's also politically, sheriffs, especially we had a couple sheriffs in Florida that used the catching of predators to be kind of their thing. They were always on TV. Look, who we just busted. We're out there protecting the citizenry. But the big thing is child pornography is is not the biggest crime on the internet. It is certainly in statistics, fraud is a much greater threat and crime than child pornography. But the protection of the innocent is just one of those things that we take very close to heart, and it's definitely something that everybody wants to see eradicated and prosecuted, and it becomes one of those crimes that everybody's involved in. So there are many reasons why we spend so much time on child pornography, but a lot of it comes down to politics, money, and just it's the right thing to do. You know, pedophiles, like any other deviant, personal sexual stimulation, reduce child and the inhibitions in a child. We send back and forth adult pictures. We kind of get it, and then I lower the age a little bit, see how you deal with it, and then I lower the age again, see how you deal with it. So they spend a lot of time, luring the child into this sense that it's okay to look at child pornography, and eventually we'll reduce it to a point where now you are looking at other kids. But one of the big problems you have with this is kids are sending pornography to each other with instant messaging and stuff like that, and it's really muddied the water on what actually is child pornography, because there are kids out there sending child pornography, which would be classed as child pornography, to another child. So it gets really difficult when you're dealing with adolescents that are basically think it's cool to send pictures of themselves naked to another kid, that ultimately it's child pornography. But the law, you look at it and you go, wow, is this kid really a pedophile, or is he just a kid that's looking at his girlfriend who's 13 or 14 years old? I mean, it gets really dicey when you have two 14-year-olds that are exchanging inappropriate pictures. Is he really a pedophile? Are you going to label him for the rest of his life as a pedophile? Are you going to label her as a pedophile, the rest of her life as a pedophile, put her on a list? So we got a lot of problems right now trying to identify, what is child pornography, and is it only when adults involved, or is it, anytime, that someone's involved? So there's a lot of problems with that. And again, we talked about this before. It's an instructional tool. Hey, this is what I really like. This is what you should do. This is why it's okay. Look, other kids are doing it. It's not a big deal. Bartering and trading, and then the blackmail, which we've already discussed. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We don't catch somebody when they first start getting into child pornography, or even in with the child molesters. They will do it once or twice, and they probably will not get caught right away. But what will happen is they'll start getting braver. And when you start talking about child molestation, you're talking about people that are they're having non-consensual sex, and a lot of times child molestation is a power play. I have power over something or someone, and I can take advantage of that power to allow me to take advantage of this child, for example. A lot of child molestation is family oriented. A lot of it is relatives and people that the child knows, and there's a huge issue when that happens, because the child doesn't want to report, Uncle Bob. Bob's a pretty cool guy. The problem with having a family member involved in your investigation is, again, it makes it very difficult to investigate. Too, many families just will not report it, especially close-knit families. They will take care of it internally, and you'll find out later on that Uncle Bob, this is not the first time that Uncle Bob or Aunt Sue did something inappropriate with a child. This may be the final straw that someone has, or someone just has enough and says no more, and they go to the court, or they go to the police department and report this person. And then when you start investigating, you find out that everybody knew about it, and everybody just kind of turned a blind eye. And it's unfortunate, but it does happen quite often. The four-step model of child molestation, the offender must have motivation to sexually abuse a child, and any internal inhibitions against acting on the motivation to engage in sexual assault must be overcome. Okay, this is back to your choice theory. Is the risk greater than the reward? And if my reward is the sexual gratification or the risk that someone's going to tell mom or dad that I'm gonna make the choice. So again, we're back to our choice theory, which you talked about earlier in the course. And then the offender has to have that kind of desire to want to be with a child, and that happens to a lot of adults for different reasons. Some of it's just psychological. Some of it is regret, revenge, inadequacy. There's all kinds of different psychological reasons why people do what they do. And they say that people that are molested tend to molest again, or be molesters. And that's one of the troubling things is somebody that is molesting someone, they're not just causing a problem for that day, they're affecting that child for the rest of their lives. And that child may end up growing up to be the external implications, acting on the impulse to abuse. Again, once I have made my choice, then I've got to act on it. Yeah, I made my choice and I think it's a good thing. I'm going to do what I want to do, but there's still the act. Am I going to actually do the crime? And that comes into that avoidance or resistance by the child that must be overcome. So I decide that I want to do it, and the child now is giving me opposition. The child is now a problem for me because the child knows that I can get into trouble. Parents are around. I have to overcome the child's objection. I may have to overcome the child's resistance. I may have to take a power position with the child, or an authoritarian power position with the child, where I take control and I lead the child to do the things that I believe that they should do with me. So it all comes down to the individual, basically having the belief that it's okay, the understanding that it's against society, but it's still okay, the opportunity to make something happen, and then overpowering the child and taking advantage of the child either physically or mentally. And the avoidance of resistance by a child, again, that might be a physical resistance and also maybe a mental resistance. So again, I have to go through those 4 steps to enact the molestation. There are situational child molesters. A situational child molester is somebody that they're in a position and they probably haven't thought about it a lot before, or maybe they've never thought about it, but all of a sudden they're in a position where they can take advantage of a child, and they take advantage of the child. Regressed molesters, these are ones that were molested as a child. They've regressed and they've grown up, and now for whatever reason they're coming out and they are doing the wrong thing. Morally indiscriminate. Who cares? It's not a crime. Kids are kids and they're sexual beings and blah, 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 blah. And they take on or they go after a child because they just don't care. It's not that big of a deal. Inadequate child molesters, these are the ones that they can't get a girlfriend in any other way. So they go after, a child or someone that can't really fight back. This is all power, and this is a big power play for a lot of these guys. And this is probably the most common one that I saw was this, the ones that were the inadequates, because they're also the ones that feel the most guilt. and they will make mistakes. They tend to be the ones that are not as careful because they do know that what they're doing is wrong, and they do feel that they should be caught. And even though they're committing an act, they actually do it in a way that allows them to be caught. Sexually indiscriminate, again, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. Sex is sex, male, female, who cares? It is what it is. You know, these are dangerous people. You know, these molesters are very dangerous when it comes to the children. And a lot of these guys, you just don't know who they are. A lot of them are, again, family members, people that have that relational power control, where they will say, you know, you're going to tear this family apart. Your mom and dad are going to get divorced. Did they find out this happened? All these other things that go into the manipulation of the child to keep the child quiet. As disturbing as it is, sex tourism is an up and coming and growing business. There are lots of Americans that go into the Asias routinely for sex tourism, and they basically go to a country that is not as aggressive in the prosecution of child pornography. Poorer countries, for example. I remember watching, we were doing a sting on a couple of live streaming sites, and basically they dragged a child into a room, and then people typed on the sidebar to what they wanted done to the child, and you know, they did what they wanted to do to the child. Well, when you start really investigating it, you know, the parents of the children will say things such as, I would rather my child be molested than starve to death. We're from a country where we have no other choice. There is nothing else that we can do. Children are nothing more than another stock in trade. There's something more like property, you know, things like that. And these parents truly believe that they're not doing the wrong thing. All they're doing is surviving. And survival is more important to them than you know, whether or not the child has sex. And a lot of the fathers of these poorer people have a very callous attitude towards their children, especially in the Slavic countries. Places like Thailand, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Taiwan, these are all your traditional places. You have your two types of sex tourists, your preferential abusers and your situational abusers. Preferential, I go to the travel agent or the guy that's setting up my tour, and I tell him exactly what I want. You know, little boy, Asian, you know, under the age of 7, above the age of 5, and I'm very clear on what I want to do. And they basically book and arrange a tour or put together a tour that allows me to take advantage of my sexual deviations. Situational abusers, I just might not know that I'm doing this to go and be you know, a child molester, and then I get there and it's like, well, you know, I'm here and their kids are being offered to me, and you know, I'm never going to have this opportunity in the States. You know, what the heck? They've already had sex with other people. It's not like I'm the first person this guy or girl's been with. You know, and they start justifying. They justify their lives, why they're there. They justify everything that's going on, and you know, basically they become this situational abuser. It's more of an excuse mechanism. The problem with this type of tourism and the enforcement of all these different crimes is just you don't have enough cops. You just really don't have enough police on the street. You don't have enough trained enforcement in these countries, and you don't have enough trained enforcement in our country, honestly, to go after all these different types of crimes and these different types of investigations. Most of these crimes are difficult to prosecute. They're difficult to find the people. They're difficult to track. And a lot of police departments just don't have the manpower and they don't have the expertise that they need to go after and investigate or prosecute. Like it says here, largely anonymous and multi-jurisdictional. So you've got Bob the sheriff, or a deputy sheriff in any town USA, in any county USA, and he is a single deputy. He has a sheriff, and that's it. It's a three-man department, day shift, night shift, and the sheriff. They're going to have a tough time prosecuting or even investigating a multi-jurisdictional case. So, one of the things that the pedophile looks for is places where they can do these types of crimes and they don't have to worry about local law enforcement. So a lot of these little cities and towns are handpicked by pedophiles and pedophile groups, and they're listed out onto the internet in these child molestation groups and these sex groups and the tourist groups, of places where they're just not going to get caught and nobody really is looking and no one's going to care. Who are your agencies that are going to go on out here? We talked about this earlier. The FBI, ICE, Postal Inspection, who does a great job. Department of Justice, Child Exploitation, Obscenity Section, and NCMEC, the National Center of Missing Exploited Children. These are all organizations, and they don't have one on here, which is ICAC, which is the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Forces. ICAC is huge. It falls under the FBI, but they should really specify that specifically, because ICAC is a great organization, and they work with the RCFLs, the Regional Computer Forensic Labs, around the country, and they're deeply involved in the protection of children. There's also a couple of organizations out of Seattle that work with Microsoft on the sex tourism and the sex trade, the human trafficking trade. They actually have investigators that go out into Asia and they seek out these rings, and they do their best to eradicate them. So this has been Chapter 8. Not an extremely entertaining subject, but it's certainly one that, if you're going to be involved in cyber investigations or computer crime, you're going to have this as a part of your investigation at some point. You are going to have to, if you're a part of a computer crime investigation squad, you are going to see child pornography. It is what it is. It's one of the crimes that you're going to run across. It's one of the crimes that someone's going to come to you with. And unfortunately, it's one that you'll probably have to deal with. It's nothing pleasant about it. It's not an extremely enjoyable job, but it's something that has to be done. It needs to be done, and there, investigators out there need to get trained. So folks like you that are going through this program here, that leave here and hopefully become investigators in the future, will certainly help turn the tide on kind of the landslide of exploitation that's been going on. All right, well, that is Chapter 8, and as always, I will see you in the next chapter.